The station hung at the edge of everything, a massive structure built from materials that didn't exist in normal space. The Galactic Memorial Archives had stood here for 3 million years, recording the deaths that mattered. Not all deaths, just the ones that changed things. Every 1,000 cycles, the Cosmic Loss Commission gathered to hear testimony. Representatives from every known species came to present their greatest sacrifices, the moments when their people gave everything so others could continue. The archives stored these stories in quantum crystals that would outlast stars. Dr. Sarah Chun stepped off the transport ship and felt her stomach drop. The station's artificial gravity felt wrong, tuned for species much larger than humans. She carried a small bag over her shoulder and a data core in her hand. Nothing else. Behind her, the other human delegation members had chosen to stay on Earth. They said she didn't need an entourage for this. She wasn't sure if that was confidence or indifference. The main chamber stretched upward for what looked like miles. Beings of every shape filled the space. Some floated in spheres of liquid. Others existed as patterns of light. A few were so large they appeared on view screens rather than in person. Sarah had studied xenobiology for 20 years and still couldn't identify half the species present. The Vrelians occupied an entire section, their collective consciousness humming through thousands of individual bodies. The Zhao formed a crystal forest near the viewing windows, their surfaces refracting starlight into songs. The Marish delegation swam in a suspended sphere of water, their translucent bodies pulsing with bioluminescence. Each species had brought elaborate displays, holographic monuments, choirs and orchestras and things Sarah had no words for. She clutched her bag tighter and found her designated spot. It was in the back, naturally. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 300 years. Most of these civilizations measured their histories in millions. Earth was the new arrival, the young upstart barely worthy of acknowledgement. The commission sat at the center of everything. 5 beings, each representing one of the galaxy's eldest species. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched stars die. The one in the middle, a caretaker named Vezimuth, had existed for 2 million years. Her kind didn't die of age, only choice or violence. She looked like a column of flowing silver, constantly shifting, never quite holding one shape. Vezimuth's voice resonated through the chamber without sound, translating directly into every mind present. We gather to remember, to witness, to preserve the moments when life chose meaning over existence. Let the testimony begin. The first species to present was the Cauldrith. Their representative, a being of living stone, projected images of their world's final days. A plague had swept through their civilization, something that turned their silicon-based bodies brittle and weak. The cure existed, but it required an energy expenditure that would drain their sun prematurely. 5 billion Cauldrith had walked into conversion chambers, transforming their bodies into pure energy to power the cure. Their world survived. 50 billion lived because 5 billion chose to become light. The chamber filled with respectful silence. Several species made gestures of reverence. Next came the Zhao. Their crystalline forms chimed in harmony as they displayed their sacrifice. A gamma-ray burst had been detected, heading straight for a cluster of inhabited systems. The Zhao, whose bodies could absorb and redirect enormous amounts of energy, had positioned themselves in the path of the radiation. They had shattered their unified consciousness, fragmenting into billions of individual, unreachable minds to create a shield that lasted just long enough. 17 systems survived. The Zhao would never sing as one again. On and on it went. The Velians presented the hive mind that dissolved itself to seed a barren world with consciousness. The Marish showed the generation that boiled their own oceans to create a thermal barrier against an extinction event. The Torth displayed the warriors who held a dimensional breach while their people escaped, knowing the breach would seal with them inside it. Each sacrifice was magnificent. Each involved millions or billions making a calculated choice. The math was always clear. These many die so those many can live. The decision was terrible but logical, comprehensible. The sort of thing any rational species would do when survival demanded it. Sarah watched and felt smaller with each presentation. What was she doing here? These were civilizations that had faced apocalypses and made impossible choices. Humanity had never faced anything like that. Sure, there were wars and disasters, but nothing requiring billions to die in one coordinated act. Hours passed. Species after species presented their monuments to organized sacrifice. The commission listened to each one with deep attention, making notes that would be stored forever in the archives. Finally, Vesemeth's voice filled the chamber again. We have heard from the great civilizations. Now we will hear from the younger species. Let Earth present its testimony. Sarah stood on shaking legs. She walked to the central platform, feeling hundreds of thousands of eyes and sensors and consciousness fields focus on her. Her mouth was dry. The bag felt impossibly heavy. Honored Commission, she began, her voice amplified by technology she didn't understand. I cannot present humanity's greatest sacrifice. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Confusion, some amusement. The Varelian hive buzzed with what might have been dismissive laughter. I cannot present it, Sarah continued, because we don't have one. We have never faced a moment where millions of us had to die at once to save billions. We've been lucky that way, or perhaps just young. More murmurs. A few species seemed ready to dismiss her entirely. Vesemeth, however, remained perfectly still, watching. Sarah placed the data core on the platform. But I brought something else. I brought thousands of her sacrifices. Small ones. Individual ones. The kind we make every day. She activated the core. Images began to fill the space above the platform. A firefighter running into a burning building. A soldier throwing himself on a grenade. A mother pushing her child out of the way of a falling beam and taking the impact herself. A pilot steering a failing aircraft away from a populated area. A doctor staying behind in a plague ward. A stranger diving into freezing water to save someone drowning. These are our sacrifices, Sarah said quietly. They don't save billions. Sometimes they save only one person. Sometimes they save no one. But we make them anyway. The chamber had gone silent. The images kept coming. Across cultures, across centuries, the same pattern repeated. Individual humans choosing probable death for others. Not because calculation demanded it. Not because it was the logical choice. Often despite logic. Sarah opened her bag and pulled out a worn journal. This belonged to my grandfather. He was a search and rescue pilot. His job was to fly into places other people were fleeing. Hurricanes. Mountains in zero visibility. War zones. He wrote about every mission. She read an entry at random. March 15th, 2287. Got the call at 0300. 3 hikers lost on Mount Hood. Storm rolling in. Jenny said I didn't have to go. She was right. But someone had to, and I was the one with the most experience in those conditions. Thought about my daughter the whole flight. Thought I might not see her again. Found the hikers. All 3 made it. So did I, but I didn't know I would when I left. Sarah looked up at the commission. He died on a mission when I was 15. Mechanical failure during a rescue. The people he was trying to save survived. He didn't. She put the journal back in her bag. I've brought records of 10,000 similar stories. Firefighters and soldiers and doctors and ordinary people who saw someone in danger and moved toward it instead of away. We have medals and monuments for these deaths. We tell their stories. We honor them. But the strange thing is, we don't consider them unusual. We consider them what you're supposed to do. The Vrelian hive spoke, their collective voice uncertain. But this is illogical. One rescue pilot dying means no pilot for the next rescue. One parent dying protecting one child leaves other children without that parent. The individual sacrifice may save one, but cost the many. Yes, Sarah said simply. It's not optimal. It's not efficient. But it's who we are. She deactivated the display and picked up her data core. That's all I have to present. Thank you for listening. She walked back to her spot in silence. The chamber remained quiet. Species were communicating with each other in ways Sarah couldn't detect, probably debating whether humanity was noble or simply too stupid to calculate properly. Vesmith finally spoke. The commission will deliberate. All representatives will remain until we reach a decision. The 5 ancient beings withdrew to a private chamber. Sarah sat down, exhausted. She'd done what she came to do. Whether it mattered was beyond her control now. The viewing galleries erupted the moment the commission left. Sarah couldn't understand most of the languages being spoken, but her translator implant struggled to keep up with the volume of simultaneous conversations. She caught fragments, confusion, debate, what might have been anger from some species. A Vrelian unit approached her, about 50 bodies moving in perfect synchronization. When they spoke, all 50 mouths formed the words together. We do not understand your presentation, human. You showed weakness, not strength. Sacrifice without calculation is waste. Sarah met their many eyes. Maybe, but it's our waste to make. The Vrelian bodies tilted their heads in identical motions. You diminish the meaning of sacrifice by making it common. The Zhao shattered their consciousness to save 17 systems. Your grandfather died to save 3 individuals who were foolish enough to climb mountains in storms. How are these equivalent? They're not, Sarah admitted. I never said they were. I just said we do it anyway. Another species joined the conversation, the Torth, beings of crystallized thought who communicated through projected images. They showed Sarah a calculation. Your grandfather's remaining lifespan versus the 3 hikers' combined contributions to human civilization. The math does not justify his sacrifice. I know, Sarah said. He knew too. He went anyway. Why? The question came from multiple species at once, their curiosity overriding their DISM, ISSIVENESS. Sarah thought about her grandfather, about the journal she'd read 100 times. Because they needed help, and he could give it. That was enough. A being made of light, representing the lux of communion, drifted closer. But you said he thought of his daughter. Of you. He knew his death would harm you. Yet he chose the strangers over you. No, Sarah said, feeling tears she hadn't expected. He chose to be the person he wanted me to become. Someone who helps. He used to say that we're not on this earth alone. That being human means being responsible for each other. All of us. Even the strangers. The Luxith dimmed and brightened in a pattern that might have been contemplation. This suggests every human carries this impulse. Is this accurate? Sarah pulled up statistics on her datapad. Every year on Earth, about 50,000 people die trying to save others. That's not soldiers or people who signed up for dangerous jobs. That's ordinary people who saw someone drowning or trapped or in danger and just moved to help. We have a phrase for it. Without thinking. People jump in without thinking. This is madness, the Torth projected. Civilization requires thought. Requires calculation. Maybe, Sarah said. But it also requires someone to go into the burning building. The debates continued for hours. Sarah watched species she'd only read about arguing over humanity's nature. Some thought humans were evolutionarily damaged, a species that hadn't learned proper survival instincts. Others suggested humans must have some kind of collective unconsciousness that made individual death less significant. A few thought humanity's violence throughout history had created a death-seeking culture. A Marish diplomats swam to the edge of their containment sphere, close enough for Sarah to see the bioluminescent patterns flowing across their translucent skin. "I have studied your species," they said, their voice bubbling through the water. "Your history is violent. Much warfare. Much death. Perhaps this sacrifice is simply another expression of that violence." Sarah shook her head. "I thought about that. But the sacrifice goes back before the violence. And it exists in our most peaceful cultures. It's not about violence. It's about connection." "Explain," the Marish said. "We're tribal," Sarah said. "That's the word we use. We form connections easily. Family, friends, neighbors, even strangers we've just met. And once we feel that connection, that person becomes worth protecting. Worth dying for, if it comes to that." But the statistics you showed included people saving complete strangers. People they had no connection to. "We connect fast," Sarah said. "Someone drowning is no longer a stranger the moment you see them struggling. They're a person who needs help. That's connection enough." The Marish's patterns pulsed in what might have been understanding or confusion. "This makes you vulnerable. An enemy could exploit this impulse easily." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "It's been done. But we keep doing it anyway because the alternative is being people who don't help. And we decided a long time ago that we'd rather die helping than live as people who look away." More hours passed. Sarah was exhausted, running on stimulants from her medical kit. She watched the different species process what she'd presented. Some remained dismissive. Others were clearly troubled by something they'd seen in the data. The Zhao's crystalline forms sang in discordant patterns, their fractured consciousness struggling to reach consensus. Finally, deep into what would have been night by Earth standards, a caretaker emerged from the deliberation chamber. Not Vezimuth, but another of the five, a being called Morfret, who appeared as a constellation of floating geometric shapes. "The Commission requests additional testimony," Morfret announced. "We wish to understand the cultural context of human sacrifice. Dr. Chun, you will answer questions." Sarah stood, fighting through the fatigue. "Of course." Morfret's shapes rotated. "In your data, we observed human children being taught about sacrifice. Stories, games, lessons. This suggests this behavior is culturally programmed rather than instinctive. If you stopped teaching it, would it cease?" Sarah thought carefully. "We teach it because it's valued. But I don't think we created it. We have records of people making sacrifices before we had organized cultures to teach them. A parent protecting a child. Someone sharing food when they're starving. I think the teaching just reinforces something that's already there." "Other species have parental protective instincts," Morfret said. "But you showed data of humans protecting unrelated individuals. Humans from different genetic populations. Even humans protecting non-humans. How do you explain this expansion beyond biological imperative?" "We're good at expanding circles," Sarah said. "We start with family, then tribe, then nation, eventually species. And for some of us, the circle just keeps growing until it includes everyone. Everything. I showed you a recording of a firefighter who died saving a dog from a burning building. The dog wasn't even his. He just couldn't stand the idea of a living thing burning to death." Morfret's shapes collapsed into a tight formation. "This behavior is evolutionarily unsustainable. Species that sacrifice irrationally for non-kin should be outcompeted by more rational species. Yet humanity thrives. Explain this paradox." Sarah smiled despite her exhaustion. Because for every person who dies saving someone, there are dozens of people saved who go on to do the same for others. The sacrifice multiplies. It spreads. My grandfather saved 3 people that day he died. One of them became a doctor who now works in disaster zones. She saved hundreds, maybe thousands by now. The math doesn't work in the moment, but it works over time. We invest deaths and get back lives. Not efficiently, but it compounds. Interesting, Morford said. You describe sacrifice as an investment in cultural continuity rather than immediate survival. I describe it as doing the right thing, Sarah said. The benefits are a side effect. Morford's shape spun faster. But you are aware of the benefits. You track them. You celebrate them. This suggests calculation exists within the act. Sure, Sarah admitted. We're not stupid. We know that societies where people help each other work better than societies where everyone only looks out for themselves. But that's not why individuals make the choice in the moment. In the moment, they're just helping. The geometric shape suddenly exploded outward, filling a massive space. This is the paradox the Commission struggles with. Your species exhibits both rationality and irrationality simultaneously. You calculate the value of sacrifice culturally, while individuals perform it without calculation. How is this resolved? Sarah laughed, a sound that echoed strangely in the vast chamber. It's not resolved. That's the point. We're contradictory. We're rational enough to build starships and irrational enough to die for strangers. Both things are true at the same time. We don't resolve it. We live it. Morford's shape slowly contracted back into their original configuration. The Commission will continue deliberations. The caretaker vanished. Sarah sat down hard, her legs finally giving out. Around her, the debates had quieted. Species watched her with new attention, though she couldn't read their expressions or intentions. A young human voice came through her communicator. Dr. Chun, this is Transport Ship Galileo. We've been monitoring the proceedings. You're doing great. Sarah smiled at the ceiling. I'm falling asleep standing up. There's a rest station on level 40. We can guide you there. No, Sarah said. I need to be here when they finish. That could be days. Then it's days. She pulled out her grandfather's journal again and read while she waited. His words, his thoughts, his choice to be someone who helped. Around her, the galaxy watched and wondered if humans were brilliant or broken. Maybe both, Sarah thought. Probably both. The Commission reconvened after 2 full days of deliberation. Sarah had slept in her chair, eaten ration bars from her bag, and ignored the dozens of species that wanted to ask her questions. She was saving her energy for whatever came next. When the 5 ancient beings emerged, the entire chamber fell into immediate silence. Vezimuth floated to the center position, her silver form rippling with unusual agitation. Sarah had studied caretaker behavior before coming. Agitation meant disagreement within the Commission, something that rarely happened. We have reached a decision, Vezimuth said, her voice filling every mind present. But first, we acknowledge that this decision was not unanimous. This testimony has created division among the Commission for the first time in 12,000 cycles. A wave of shock rolled through the gathering. Some species made sounds of disbelief. The Varelian hive's humming grew discordant. Even Sarah felt her heart rate spike. She'd expected dismissal or perhaps polite acknowledgement. Not this, Vezimuth continued. We 5 have witnessed countless acts of sacrifice across millions of years. We have seen species give everything to preserve their future. We established the archives and this commission because we believed the willingness to sacrifice for others represented the highest achievement of conscious life. The moment when survival instinct is overcome by something greater. The silver form stretched upward, becoming a column that reached toward the chamber's distant ceiling. Humanity has shown us something we did not expect. Something that challenges our fundamental understanding of sacrifice itself. Morford's geometric shapes appeared beside Vezimuth. The disagreement within the Commission centers on interpretation. We all observed the same data. We all acknowledge its accuracy. But we disagree on its meaning. A third caretaker emerged, one Sarah recognized as Keltham, a being that appeared as a slowly rotating black sphere. I will present the minority position first. 2 members of the Commission believe humanity's behavior represents a failure of evolutionary development. That individual humans sacrifice without calculation because they lack the cognitive sophistication to properly assess costs and benefits. This position holds that humanity's sacrifices are numerous because they are cheap. They mean less because they happen more. Sarah felt anger flash through her exhaustion, but forced herself to stay quiet. This position, Keltham continued, suggests that when humanity faces a true existential crisis requiring billions to die in a coordinated act, they will fail to do so. That their small, irrational sacrifices prepare them poorly for the large, necessary ones. That the galaxy should view human sacrifice as quantitatively impressive, but qualitatively inferior. Silence filled the chamber. Sarah could feel species considering this interpretation. Some seemed to agree with it. Then Vezimuth's voice returned, and Sarah heard something in it she couldn't quite identify. The majority position, shared by 3 members of the Commission, is different. We believe humanity has revealed a form of sacrifice we have never properly recognized. One that may be more profound than the coordinated species-wide sacrifices we have celebrated for so long. The silver form flowed back down to a more conventional height. Every species here has presented moments of ultimate sacrifice. Millions or billions dying together to save their civilization. These acts are magnificent. They represent calculation elevated to nobility. The trolley problem resolved by those on one track choosing to die for those on the other. But consider what precedes such moments. Consider the millions of years between existential crises. In those long, peaceful ages, what happens to the capacity for sacrifice? It atrophies. It waits, dormant, until catastrophe forces its activation. Species go millennia without needing to sacrifice, and so they forget how. Vezimuth's form began to pulse with light. Humanity does not forget. They practice. Every single day, across their entire species, humans practice sacrifice. Small ones. Imperfect ones. Irrational ones. They run into burning buildings for strangers. They donate organs to children they'll never meet. They take bullets meant for others. They die in storms rescuing people who should have known better than to need rescue. And by doing this, the ancient being continued, they have made sacrifice reflexive. Not a last resort calculated in desperation, but a first response trained through repetition. An instinct built through culture, reinforced through story, practiced through action. When a human sees someone in danger, their immediate response is to help. Not to calculate. Not to assess. To help. Sarah's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her legs to still them. Morford's shapes began spinning rapidly. We studied humanity's history extensively during our deliberation. We observed their wars, which are brutal and frequent. We noted that even in war, humans make sacrifices. Medics who run into fire to reach wounded. Soldiers who cover retreats. Pilots who steer failing aircraft away from populated areas, even when those populations are their enemies. We observed their disasters. Buildings collapse, ships sink, plagues spread. And in every single one, there are humans who move toward the danger rather than away, who dig through rubble until their hands bleed, who stay on sinking vessels, ensuring others escape first, who remain in quarantine zones treating the sick. The shapes contracted suddenly, and most remarkably, We observed their ordinary days. Days without war or disaster. A human sees another human having a medical emergency on the street. They stop. They help. They perform CPR on a stranger. Another human sees someone being attacked. They intervene, risking their own safety for someone they don't know. A human sees a child wandering alone. They stay with that child until their parent is found. These tiny sacrifices, Morford said, collectively represent something unprecedented. A species-wide commitment to mutual aid, reinforced not through law or calculation, but through cultural expectation and individual choice. Humans help because they've been taught that helping is what humans do. Vesemeth's light grew brighter. The Commission's majority position is this: humanity has demonstrated that sacrifice need not be rare to be beautiful. That making it common does not diminish it, but rather transforms it into something more powerful. A foundation rather than a last resort. The ancient being's voice grew softer but somehow more intense. We have celebrated species that sacrifice when they must. Humanity sacrifices when they can. This is the difference. The Caldrith calculated that 5 billion must die for 50 billion to live. They made the logical choice, and it was terrible and beautiful. But they would not have made that choice if the calculation had been different. Humans make the choice regardless of calculation. A human will die for one stranger when their own life might save thousands later. They know this. They do it anyway, because the stranger in front of them needs help, and they can provide it, and that is enough. Sarah realized she was crying. She didn't try to stop. The Commission's declaration, Vesemeth announced, her voice now reaching across the quantum network to every linked world in the galaxy, is that humanity has revealed the most beautiful form of sacrifice. Not because it is the largest, not because it is the most logical, but because it is the most freely given, because it is woven into the fabric of their daily existence, because they have made dying for others as natural as living for themselves. Other species sacrifice when survival demands it. Humans sacrifice because love demands it. Love for the stranger, the other, the unknown future. They pay for that love with themselves again and again, generation after generation, until the very act of being human means being ready to die for others. The chamber exploded with sound. Some species were celebrating. Others were arguing. A few were silent, processing. The Vrelian hive was actually breaking apart, individual bodies moving independently as the collective consciousness fragmented under the weight of new thoughts. Vesemeth waited for silence, then continued. This declaration comes with acknowledgement of humanity's flaws. They are violent. They are contradictory. They are young and often foolish. But they have shown us that sacrifice need not wait for apocalypse. That the willingness to die for others can be practiced daily, refined through repetition, until it becomes as natural as breathing. The archives will now record not just the great sacrifices, the billions dying together, but also the small ones. The firefighters and the pilots and the strangers who dive into rivers. Because these small sacrifices, multiplied across time and space, may matter more than any single great one. Keltham's black sphere pulsed. The minority wishes their disagreement recorded. We maintain that individual sacrifice without calculation is beautiful, but unsustainable. We predict humanity will fail when faced with true species-level crisis. Recorded, Vesemeth said. And time will reveal which interpretation is correct. But until that day, the Commission's official position stands. The most beautiful act in existence is not dying when you must, but being ready to die whenever you can help. Humanity has made this readiness their defining trait. The ancient being turned toward Sarah. Dr. Chun, your testimony has changed how the galaxy understands sacrifice. What you intended as a minor presentation has become the most significant in the Commission's history. Do you have any final words? Sarah stood on shaking legs. Her mind was blank. What could she possibly add to that? Then she thought of her grandfather, of his journal, of the last entry he'd written before the flight that killed him. My grandfather wrote something, she said quietly. The night before his last mission. He said, "If I don't come back, tell Sarah that being human means being responsible for each other. That there's no such thing as someone else's problem. That you help because you can, and that's reason enough." That's all he wanted me to know. That helping was enough? She paused, swallowing hard. We're not special. We're not better than anyone here. We're just a species that decided a long time ago that we'd rather die helping than live looking away. If that's beautiful, then I'm glad. But we didn't do it to be beautiful. We did it because someone has to, and we were there. Vesmuth's form blazed with light so bright Sarah had to look away. And that, the ancient being said, is exactly why it's the most beautiful act in existence. Because you don't do it for beauty. You do it because, as you say, someone has to. And you are there. The commission adjourned. The gathering began to disperse. Sarah sat down, utterly drained. Around her, species approached to speak, to question, to understand. Some wanted to argue. Others wanted to express something that might have been respect or gratitude. But Sarah barely heard them. She was thinking about her grandfather, about the 3 people he'd saved who went on to save others, about the cascade effect of one person's choice rippling forward through time, about how sacrifice might work like compound interest, each death invested returning dividends measured in lives. A message came through her communicator. Transport ship Galileo, ready to take her home. But also something else. A transmission from Earth. The director of the Search and Rescue Academy had been watching the proceedings. Dr. Chun, we've seen a 400% increase in applications in the last 2 hours. People who watched the commission proceedings. They want to know how to help. How to be ready to help. What do we tell them? Sarah smiled through her tears. Tell them to think about who they want to be. Then be that person. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. She gathered her things. The journal went back in her bag, careful and safe. She'd return it to the museum when she got home. Above it, they'd place a new plaque with the commission's words. Future generations would read about the day the galaxy learned that humanity's gift wasn't technology or art or even courage. It was simpler than that. It was the willingness to help, practice daily, until an entire species knew in their bones that there's no such thing as someone else's problem. That you help because you can. That helping is enough. As Sarah walked back to the transport ship, she passed the memorial walls where species had carved the names of their great sacrifices. Millions of names. Millions. Each representing a moment of impossible choice. She wondered if humanity would add a wall someday. Not one wall. Thousands. Millions. Every firefighter and soldier and doctor and stranger who ran toward danger instead of away. Every parent and friend and random passerby who chose someone else over themselves. It would take a lot of walls. But then again, humans were good at building things. Especially memorials. Especially ones that reminded them to be better tomorrow than they were today. She boarded the ship and headed home, carrying a bag and a journal and the weight of a galaxy's attention. Behind her, the Cosmic Loss Commission began the slow work of reimagining what sacrifice meant. Of understanding that beauty wasn't always found in the grand coordinated act, but sometimes in the repeated small choice. The choice to help. The choice to risk. The choice to be there when someone needs you. Because being there is what makes you human.